Okay, everybody here. Let's start. So, uh, Havik is working on detached mounts project for Google Summer of Code for CRIU, and we really tried to do something very cool, but we faced some difficulties. We will say about it, and yeah, let's start. I give you a word.
Okay. So before we get into the project, a couple of terminology that I'd like to clear up. So by a detached mount, what I mean is a mount that has been unmounted using mount detach. So generally in the kernel, people call this an unmounted mount. And for an anonymous mount, we refer to a mount object that is created using OpenTree or FS mount. These are part of the new mount APIs. And these are generally in kernel, these are called detached mounts. And by a file on a detached mount, we mean an FD that was open on that mount point before it was unmounted using mount detach. So we should probably switch our terminology to be more in line with the kernel, but yeah. So basically, our problem here is that while dumping file descriptors, while doing checkpoint restore of file descriptors, we need a mount. We need to also know the mount on which this FD was open. So for that, we get the mount ID from FD info from proc and mount info also from proc mount info. However, if this FD is on a detached mount, we don't have that mount in mount info. So we need some sort of a way to get this mount info to support detached mounts. Uh, so for that, we initially thought that we could use stat mount. So stat mount was a new syscall that was introduced with kernel 6.8, and it takes in a mount ID and along with its mount namespace ID, and it'll give you a large struct with basically has everything we would need. But we face this problem that stat mount does not work for detached mounts. So we had to propose changes to the kernel so that we would have some way to get mount info for detached mounts. We propose two different methods.
Maybe we should,
One,
can you return to the slide, and maybe we should clarify why it doesn't work. So basically, uh, if we just provide mount ID, the syscall tries to find this mount in current mount namespace. And we need some like mount ID, mount namespace ID to find mount in different mount namespace. And we don't have it for detached mounts.
yeah. So the first change that we proposed was to allow stat mount to take in an FD, and so stat mount would return mount info for the mount this FD was opened on. So, and we basically allowed it to uh, even work for FDs on a detached mount. But this is somewhat means we shouldn't really pass an FD to this mount ID struct. The whole API generally works around mount ID. So this is unlikely to get accepted upstream. And but it allowed us to continue our work on CRIU side of changes. And so the second method, we had a small discussion with Christian, who suggested creating a mount namespace for unmounted mounts. So whenever a mount was unmounted, it could move to that namespace, and we could pass it the namespace ID of that namespace, and we could then call stat mount on it. So we would then need some sort of way to get this unmount namespace ID, and we propose some changes to statics so that it exported the mount namespace ID as well. So we could call statics on the FD, then get mount ID and namespace ID, and then use stat mount to get everything we would need. So we do our CRIU work on top of these kernel patches. And yeah, so these are the changes that we made to CRIU. We introduced stat mount and statics. wrote a lot of changes, wrote a bunch of tests, and introduced checks to CRDAT so that we only do detached mounts when stat mount and statics are present. And we worked on the simplest case for checkpoint restore of detached bind mounts. So by detached bind mounts, I refer to the case where we have a regular mount point, regular mount, and a bind mount that has been detached using mount detach. So basically, in this case, we don't have to dump file system information, and we can use uh, information from the regular mount. And we have an FD open on the bind mount. So we have only worked for support for this case. And so the changes during dump we made were, we have a list of mounts called mount info. This is created before we start dumping file descriptors. And so if during file descriptor dump, we get a mount ID that is not in mount info list, we assume it to be a detached mount, and then we get mount info using statics and stat mount, and mark this mount to be a detached mount in the images. So yeah, and then during restore, we create a separate list of all detached mounts, and for each mount point, we create a temporary mount point, something like this, and we open all FDs on this temporary mount point. And after all FDs have been opened, basically at the end of restore, we unmount all these mount points in the list and remove our temporary mount points. This is how checkpoint restore for detached bind mounts works. And yeah, we still have a lot of things that we could add for support. A lot of cases we could support. One is for file bind mounts. So a file bind mount that has been unmounted using mount detach, and we would have to detect in this case whether this mount refers to a file or a directory. And also we have anonymous mounts which were created using OpenTree. So if we would like to add support for these, one way we could try to get mount info is to create a clone of this mount object and mount that during dump, and basically to get mount info for it. And then we have everything we would need, and we could create this mount object during restore. But these anonymous mounts are a tree of mounts. So we would have to restore this entire tree. And we would also need some sort of a kernel patch to expose the mount namespace ID similar to the unmounted mount namespace ID as well. And we will also have to take into account how sharing groups work with this. Apart from that, we also have
for sharing groups, we need to say that for detached mounts, we don't care about it because, like the unmounted mounts, I mean, in kernel terminology, is because they just don't have sharing groups.
Also, the case where we don't have a bind mount, we would have to basically partially dump the file system because we can't access root in case of detached mounts. So we would have to dump only those files which we have open FDs to, and if we have directory FDs, we would have to dump all of their subdirectories recursively. So we wrote a test case for tempf in case tempfs has only a single detached mount point. So we would dump only the open files, and we can't really do anything else about the rest of things. So yeah, there's also a wide range of possible edge cases that we could consider. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for this opportunity. Any questions?
I have a question about the stat mount. And what was the problem with the FD approach? I mean, it looks much more like logical than creating anonymous mount namespace for detached mount. And I think like the biggest problem with this anonymous, like with this extra mount namespace, it's like how to control permissions. Who can start mounts in this magic namespace? And I don't know. I mean, we in the kernel we have like open add, start add, a lot of system calls that work with like file descriptors, and it would be alright to use file descriptor for start mount.
Yeah, very good questions. Maybe I will take it because yeah, it's a little bit hard questions. So for FD-based approach, why we don't just send it to mainstream? First thing, Christian said probably it won't work. Second thing, the idea is that information about mounts we get only from root of the mount point. So it's kind of secure thing in kernel that they try to restrict all operations only to root of mount point. So if we have on detached mounts only some open files, we just don't have root. We won't be able to use this FD approach because it would say your FD is bad, like you are restricted, you don't have access to root.
Start mount can work only with root mounts, right?
Yeah, I mean root of mount. Yeah, if you give it FD to the root of mount,
Okay, I see.
you're
I see.
okay. But if you only have some files on this mount, but you don't have way to get the root, you're out of luck.
So
yeah,
it's like the biggest thing is detached file mount.
Yeah,
because like detached file mount, it's almost.
We didn't do it yet, and actually we only support this like case where we have one real mount, one not unmounted mount, and if we only have like all mounts of this super block are unmounted, then we just need to really think of good approach here, because we need to find each file, like each subdirectory. For subdirectories, we can list the content. For file, we can just save this file. So for example, for TMPFS, it would be not just archive all the contents of mount, it would be archive all those small things and put them together somehow. And on restore, try to recreate this thing, like with possibly some places just blank because we don't know what is there. And you had second part of the question, I believe. Sorry, I kind of forgot. It was something about.
No, I think the only question it was about using stat mount with file
Yeah,
descriptor.
about permissions.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I forgot. So for detached mounts, it's kind of, I mean, unmounted mounts in kernel, they will call it unmounted. So for those mounts, it's kind of easy because all permissions for mounts are checked through namespace link, but we don't have namespace for detached mounts. So no permission checks actually work for those. So we can only.
If you will have one magic mount namespace for all detached mount, you will have like all detached mounts from all users in this mount namespace, right?
Yeah.
In this case, you need to have a sort of permission check to like.
Yeah, at least we now did it like this, that we have this big namespace and it belongs to root user namespace. So any permission check would just say, you are not root. That's why
So it's not ideal for CRIU because we're trying to support like containers with user namespaces, and the end goal to be able to work not only from the root user namespace, but to be able to work from the sub user namespace. And this approach with like with your current approach, you will need to check cap sysadmin in the root user namespace.
Like for rootless, I mean, for containers, when we checkpoint restore them without global root, it would be not a good thing. So maybe we can create one detached namespace per user namespace. That would be fine, I believe.
So I think we need to.
But
we
like
need to consider
we
need to consider this problem if we're going to introduce anything in the kernel.
Okay, yeah, good point. Let's write it down somewhere.
But actually, I like the idea to use file descriptor with stat mount, and to be able to call stat mount for file descriptor that is not the root of this mount. I don't know. I mean, if you have cap sysadmin in the no, if you have cap sysadmin in the root, if you have cap sysadmin in the user namespace of this mount, it may be okay to allow statfs for. I actually don't know what statfs will
because
return
we
you.
don't have namespace link for detached mounts. That's why like we still need to add this namespace link.
So detached mount doesn't have.
Yeah, it doesn't have namespace. It's just null. I mean, it has null reference to mount namespace, so we can't find user namespace from it.
I don't know. Maybe it should have the mount namespace.
Yeah, that's basically what we implemented, but now we have only one big one. The idea
No, I mean, when we
detach something, we could leave it in the original namespace, but just mark it detached, something like this.
we remove it from the mount tree, but leave it in the mount namespace.
If we leave it in the mount namespace, it means it reference counts this mount namespace, and it might be also problematic. Like you can't untangle the mount namespaces if you have some hidden file descriptor hanging.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about. Yeah, we need to think more about this.
Yeah, definitely, it's a good thing to discuss. So,
and
I want to say
this problem.
I want to say that one big namespace is good because we can create it just once and forget about it. But if we try to have multiple namespaces, I thought about this idea, like just why we don't have a second mount namespace for each mount namespace. Like we just put detached mounts from first one to the second one, but we would need to create enormous amount of mount namespaces, and we need to do it dynamically. So probably it would affect performance, it would eat more memory, eat more resources.
So I don't like the idea with any extra mount namespaces for this task. It looks like a hack that we don't need.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, this problem with destroying the mount namespace. Actually, it's like we have the mount namespace and we have the mount tree. One of the ideas that if we have we can have like two reference counters for the mount namespace. One it's like reference counter for the mount tree, and another one is reference counter for the whole mount namespace. When the reference to the mount tree drops to 0, we like destroy the mount tree. But it's a separate thing, like the reference counter for the mount namespace. It's when we destroy the mount namespace itself. And if we have detached mount, this mount namespace will continue live. But mount tree, it will be destroyed as soon as like all users of this mount tree leave the namespace. Right, left the namespace.
Yeah, it means that if we have some FD still holding some mount, it would still hold mount namespace ID. I think mount namespace ID won't overflow, but okay.
They won't overflow, and even now, like if you have any reference to the mount tree, it will hold the mount namespace, right?
Yeah. But if you like recursively lazy on mount, you can release mount namespace.
No, with my idea, if you
with your idea,
if you recursively you mount anything, it will be like destroyed right away. So
yeah, okay.
the only thing is you will hold the mount namespace with some detached mounts.
Yeah, maybe mount namespace structure is not that big. Maybe
it's not big, and it might be a good idea to discuss this on Linux Plumbers. There is an option to present it online, so you will not to go anywhere.
If there is still available registration, maybe it's a good idea.
I think in person it's already closed, but the virtual it's still open, so you can register like a virtual attendee and attend this conference and present.
Okay, we'll think about it if we can manage in time.
Yeah, this is a very good idea because they are waiting for more proposals for sure.
Okay.
And all people who can make decision about the kernel part will be there. I mean, Christian will be there, and it's a good place to discuss this problem.
Okay. We will send Vavik and he will present.
I don't really know what any dates for this.
It should be in November or December.
No, it's in December.
Yes, conference is in December, but I guess we have only maybe 1 month until the CFP ends when they're waiting for the proposals. So maybe
and registration might be already, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't need to have the full talk ready to submit the CFP. So you can submit it now and then because you have everything basically ready for the talk.
Actually, I think we need to send some like RFC kernel versions, like kernel patches, to make it like more presentable.
Yeah, please add us to the CC for that. Yes.
So for now, it's on GitHub. Link was in presentation. Maybe we can share presentation somewhere. Any more questions? Okay,
I have one, so we can stop recording.
Okay, let me stop recording. Sorry. Okay, stop recording. Stop. Okay, it should have